GM, welcome to From A to Z. I'm Zombie Shepherd. That's Joe. She's jumping down there. Oh, Joe, I thought you were going to be in the episode. Well, um, got my super dad mug. Everything's fine, as you can see. Everything's fine. Um, Today, we're jumping back off of our the last Prepare for Turbulence episode, which is we were talking about Malthusian theory and techno optimism and things like that. And so today we're going to be talking about solutions. I haven't had any like really deep crypto episodes in a while, and part of it is because market talk really drowns out the crypto community, and in general, I beyond telling people to like be better prepared by investing in things and being just more aware of these technologies and how things work, I think that I don't want to dive super into like promoting cryptocurrency necessarily. However, I think that there is a lot to be talked about, and I haven't done it in a while. That's not what this entire episode is going to be about. So when I'm talking about solutions, we're talking about the world where we're at now, and taking into account a lot of different viewpoints, including like liberal to Democrat viewpoints, including we're going to dive into. Actually, I can probably put this on the screen too. We're gonna dive into some of the tenets laid down in anarchism and the Black Revolution, which I was talking about in our last Prepare episode. Um, did I lose those? Did I scroll past it? Where was I? Anyway, yeah, here we go. So, wait, no, this is a different section. Um, and then I'm also at the end, I'll talk more about blockchain and Ethereum and crypto and how I think that relates to a lot of this, because I haven't really laid that out in a while. Okay, here we go. I found what I wanted from anarchism and the Black Revolution. So, like I said, if we're going to start in the shallow end, which I think is what the Democrats are, if we're going to start in the shallow end, then we've got. Okay, we could say things like Congress, senators, whoever, aren't allowed to hold stock. Okay, then that's a good thing under the current. If we're talking Reformation, which I think we're well past Reformation, but if we're talking Reformation, that needs to be on the table. Is like, not being able to own stock. Um, what else falls under Reformation? Rank choice voting. I think rank choice voting falls under Reformation mainly because, but it's another good step because, like, if we had rank choice voting, then we could get a third party elected. Third party getting elected would open up the system. There's a lot of things under Reformation. There's a lot of like, no government bailouts. There should be no bailouts of any industry ever whatsoever. That should not be a thing. There's a lot of socialist things you could do, like, free college, free education. For all education should be free healthcare. You find ways to get corporations to pay for these things. Other ways, this is something I really think that corporations put off, too much responsibility onto the worker and society. So I don't think that they should be collecting taxes from workers at all. I don't think individuals should be paying taxes. So for instance, roads. Roads are predominantly used for corporate reasons, whether it's people getting to and from work, trucks tearing up the roads, which trucks cause more damage than a bunch of cars. End of story. So I think that it should be on corporations, it should be on businesses to pay for everything. Like all infrastructure should be paid for by corporations. And that is a way that is should be the state should not be paying for these things. The state should be getting these things paid for by the corporations. You know, I think it's actually even I do agree with taxing the rich, but I don't agree, with taxing work. Don't tax work, tax wealth. But even more importantly, if you got the actual businesses that do the damage to everything to actually pay the full cost of their industries, then you would be able to, like, you wouldn't need to tax individuals for these things. They would be getting paid for by business, and that should be the way it is. And the problem is in the U.S. Also, there's just a lot of bureaucracy. When you think about the legal system and you think about all these different bureaucracies that exist, like all of these businesses exist in this gray area of like who's supposed to pay for it, and the government ends up paying for everything, but the government is in a huge deficit because like all of the corporations get tax cuts and don't pay for any of the costs of what they do to the world. Um, if corporations were directly paying for everything, like they should be paying for everything. I mean it. The roads, the electricity, the water, the education. If corporations paid for everything, the healthcare, all of it, not insurance companies. Like insurance companies shouldn't even exist in the way that they do. They should exist purely for what they're supposed to be, and that is like focusing on fixing deficits and emergent. Like insurance should almost be like FEMA, where people are paying into it or things are paying into it. Once again, don't even think individuals should necessarily be responsible for this. But the money's there to deal with problems for real, not to be a for-profit organization that can like say, oh, we're not going to pay out for this, that, and the other. Like insurance as it is just vampire. Like it's a parasite on the current system. So we do need a complete reformation of the way that everything works. And that's why so many people say that we can't reform under capitalism, because capitalism prevents us from doing a lot of the things that need to be done. But they need to be done for survival of the human race, which oddly enough, something else I was thinking about, like if we're going to expand, I guess I could have saved this for later in the episode, but I'll get back to it then. So like thinking into the future, like I do think that we need to be focused on preserving humanity. But when I think preserving humanity, do I mean like locking us into the way we are now and never growing? Like, as in like, yeah, and never evolving into something new. And I think that we can think about it like this. Like we have, give or take, we have 1 billion years to evolve into something new. 1 billion years is when Earth will no longer be habitable by our current biological form. So we have 1 billion years to think about how to get the human race from point A to point B. We don't have to figure that out now. Now, that billion years is based on like planetary scale death. Like the sun will basically kill Earth and we'll be screwed. However, I think that, we could evolve to a point that we could leave the planet. We could evolve to that point technologically and physically to some degrees to change, to be more adaptive to space travel, if not, if that's the only option because we can't terraform another planet, or the other thing being another planet, like say, I don't know what it would look like, but like, maybe Mars comes into being a habitable green zone at some point, or we're able to transport enough water there to like revive it or whatever. I don't know. Being sci-fi here. Point being that we have 1 billion years to think about how to get off this planet or how to like escape all these things. And that's just based on like, that's not thinking about climate change. Climate change could dramatically shorten that if we don't like work together now. But otherwise, we got a billion years to think about transhumanism and whatever else. In the meantime, I think in preservation of humans and preservation of human society so that we can safely traverse to the next level of evolution technologically and as a species, whatever that looks like. And so, big jump to the future. Let's jump back to the present. So, yeah, like under capitalism, a lot of things won't come to be because all we're worried about is like the invisible video game score and yeah, so then when you think about how to reform the system, I'm trying to bring up to see if I can bring this up on the screen, but it's not working. What's going on, y'all? All right, so this is jumping straight from yeah, I'm not going to bring it up. Whatever. I will. Let me try one more time. Oop. Hey, there we go. I got it. Okay, so this we're gonna jump straight from like Democrat Reformation type stuff into like anarchist in the Black Revolution. This is a list of things that, in their own words, these black caucuses in the Union should demand. Rank and file Democratic control of the Union. Equal rights and treatment for all Unionists. Eliminate all racist practice in the labor movement. Affirmative action programs to redress past racist employment practices. End racial discrimination based on seniority and other ploys. Full employment for all blacks, women, and other non-white workers. A 20 to 30-hour work week with no reduction in pay. The right to strike, including wildcat strikes without union sanction. Speedier and fair grievance procedures. An escalator clause in all union contracts to ensure automatic wage adjustments to keep up with rising cost of living. Full payment of Social Security by employer and the government. Full unemployment compensation at 100 of base pay. Minimum wages at union scale. Prevent runaway shops, phony bankruptcy, or strategic plant shutdowns by companies without notice to union or to gain advantage in contract negotiations. A public works program to rebuild the black and other inner city communities and to provide work for black workers. Workers' self-management of industry by factory committees and workers' councils elected by the workers themselves. These things, the point of this is this all covers AI. This covers, like, this was written in 1993, but this very much covers like how we should be thinking about AI in the workplace. Like, we need protections that say that as a society, corporations, like if we pivot to a situation where corporations have to deal with, so even if you can't meet all of these things with labor, then there has to be a compensation in the sense of UBI. There has to be, we're not even going to call it unemployment. There should just be money going out to people in general. Like whether you employed or not, I believe UBI is the next stage of where things need to go because I've talked about it before with how our data is proof of work. Our data is oil. It is important. And so if you're participating in the internet, if you're doing things on the internet, then you should be being compensated for the amount of time that you spend producing data on the internet. And so a lot of these things that are specifically about work and unions can be applied to everything. And I've talked in other episodes about how I think that we could think about like stock in the country being paid out to everyone. That's a type of UBI. There's all different ways that we can think about how we could restructure our society to compensate people for the value they produce by existing as citizens. that value exists. And when people say, where do we get the money exists. They're just siphoning it off of you in the form of taxes, in the form of stagnant wages, in the form of houses. You can't, like, predatory housing is based on that, because the only way people feel like they can get ahead is by buying property and charging other wage slaves to live in their housing. And like that is literally like the poor being turned against each other. When one person who makes marginally amount of money more than you can become your landlord and tell you how you need to live your life and who's allowed in the house because they own the property and you don't, all these things go away in more egalitarian systems of UBI and access to work and fair wages. I've talked about remaking the money. The money needs to be created differently. The money is made poorly. The money is made to make us broke. The money is debt. Rather, the money is inflationary rather than being deflationary. I haven't really talked a lot about this, and it's because it's not something I'm well versed in, but I have watched some things and listened to some things about how and actually funny thing, I am well versed in it in the way of life in Lao Tzu. And what it is the idea that meritocracy is actually harmful to overall society, and competition is harmful. Is something that Marx and Richard Wolff is one of my favorite people, a modern economist who talks about this. But like, competition is actually really bad for society because the way of life puts it in the sense that, like, when you reward someone, when you give someone a reward for a job well done, you don't create one. You reward someone did a good job, and the reward that they received made 20 other people jealous. It didn't make those other 20 people think, I'm going to do a good job, I'm going to do better, because competition mostly leads to underhanded ways of getting ahead. And so meritocracy, rewarding people for a job well done rather than a job well done being the standard, and there being ways of bringing subpar things into an acceptable range, rather than everything being an idea of like helping to bring everything up, rather than like forcing people to compete for basic necessities and basic respect, more importantly. So that's kind of the problem. Is it's not that good things shouldn't come to people who work hard or something like that. Like, it's not that, but even though that whole idea is very religious, it like the reward for doing hard things is the thing itself. And any artist knows this. Any artist knows that, like, when you hit a note, when you paint a painting, when you create, a thing together, there is a sense of like reward that comes from, your own brain's chemicals, but like also the thing you share with other people, which is also biochemical. And like, there's already a reward for trying hard and doing hard things and learning. And that's why I do a lot of the things I do. I just love learning. I love exploring and learning and growing, and like, getting older is not going to make me stop having curiosity about the world. And yeah, so meritocracy and competition very much kind of shuts that down, because it very much turns you into, as an artist, for instance, like, how do I, why would I keep playing music when there's no market, or the market is very hard, it's very saturated, it's very, like, or you feel like the music you create doesn't fit in anywhere. And so, like, do I want to spend time learning marketing and learning how to sell myself, or do I want to spend time just doing what I love and making music and having fun? And not worrying about how other people accept it or whether or not it's gonna make me money. Like, so yeah. Uh I think that self-improvement and all these things don't go away in a society where you provide people's basic needs. I think that humanity actually thrives, and creativity thrives in a different type of environment where where you don't have to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs already proves this. Like, once you get rid of like worrying about your security and your housing and whether you're safe in your house, and then you get past food insecurity, and then you can get to a place where you think about your emotional security and creativity, and you can think about, that's when you can actually really have a deeper understanding of spirituality and religion. Like, if you're poor and suffering in the world and you're turning to religion, like, you don't have a stable enough psychological basis to be forming higher order opinions about the world. And that's intentional. It's not to talk down to poor people, it's to say that, like, being poor is traumatic, and escaping from that trauma is very hard. People who grew up poor and then get access to things have a lot of trouble, like, letting go of the trauma of being poor. Anyway, so yeah, I think that list I just read, throw that back up real quick. Yeah, that list is a great list. This is specifically like for the black caucuses and unions, but as I've said a lot, good theory, good philosophy applies to everyone. And I think that, so like, even where people are like, oh, like Marx is a European and he has kind of colonial views on some things, and he's a white man or whatever, a European male, he's coming from a patriarchal sense. Like, that's fair enough to say, but also, like, you can't say that he doesn't have valuable opinions there. And you can do what I like to do, the Venn diagram is like, you read some Marx, you read some Adam Smith, you read John Locke, you read you know, anarchism and the Black Revolution, you read Malcolm X, and you read different sources and different views on things. I also have a deep understanding of crypto and finance from that way. And so, like, having different forms of reference, you can do a Venn diagram of saying, like, well, where do things overlap and agree? And, like, where does Marx, and that's what this book right here is doing, is like, where does anarchism and the Black Revolution overlap? Because a lot of, there's a lot of, like, revolutionary theory and black feminist theory that talks about how a lot of, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were both very misogynistic in a lot of their points of view. But, like, that doesn't mean, and I even saw someone saying Bell Hooks, for instance, was very, like, patriarchal in her points of view. And so being aware of people's shortcomings and where they fall short in their philosophies doesn't mean that everything they say is wrong. It means that you look at it with that bias and you say, all right, well, I do need to be aware that sometimes this person might say things that need to be reformed because it wasn't informed enough about intersectionality. But I largely find that really good philosophy, really good theory can be transcribed to apply to other groups of people and still be highly relevant. And that is actually what makes the basis of universal and good theory. And it's why I love The Way of Life so much. Like, it's the only really quote unquote religious or spiritual text that I really reference a lot, because the viewpoints can be transcribed easily across philosophy and religion and spirituality. And that's not to say it's the end all be all of all things, but it's a good starting position, and it's a good route. It's a good basis. It's also very old. I love reading old texts. I read a lot of old texts. I got 1001 Nights, and what that's given me is Thousand and One Nights, it's literature, it's fiction, but it was word of mouth before it was ever written. And these particular versions were transcribed in the 1860s. So just a lot of, it gives you a sense of culture. Like it does give you an understanding when you read really old texts. And like, um, uh, is it right there? Where is it? Extraordinary Popular Illusions was written in the 1800s. So like, and he's a historian that pulled from even older texts to have reference for these things. So I love reading old stuff because it does give you a sense of truth, in the sense that like not every older text can be manipulated to suit the future. Like we don't live in 1984 in the harshest sense. Yeah, the internet can certainly be manipulated to say anything and everything, but older texts, it's so much harder to have changed every book in print ever. You know what I mean? And a lot of things on the internet also are PDFs, and you can see when they were created. But we're not going to argue truth here. All right, so to bring it more to the future, let's jump to the future now. So, or even like, how do we get there? Like, how would we apply a lot of these things even from this list? So, all cryptocurrency is blockchain, but blockchain doesn't necessarily need to be a cryptocurrency. The reason I bring this up is because beyond, fixing monetary policy, which I'll briefly get into, but before I get into that, let's talk about, so blockchain in general can be used to record things in blocks that are unchangeable. So these can be used for governance and election processes. We could have a more direct democracy if we figure out, we already have this in a sense that like you're not allowed to vote if you're not a citizen and you're not registered to vote, and these things. So saying we did all of those things using blockchain technology, then you would basically have to, it's just a technological thing in this, and it's better than our current electronic voting. If we're using electronic polls that we think can be manipulated, that we think have been manipulated, and Elon Musk basically admitted that. So, and the president also admitted it. So like, it's basically like we know what's going on, but if you use blockchain technology, the votes cannot be changed. They are written in a block. That block is immutable. Everyone will know if it's changed, and that is due to decentralized nodes being all over the place. And that would be, adopting decentralized technologies is the way that we are able to have governance be more direct with the people. And here's the other great part is you don't have to just have direct democracy, because I understand that most people don't know about most things and they don't care about most things. They just care about the things they care about. So you can still do representative democracy on chain, because you could have delegated votes. So you have your one vote, but you can say, all right, well, I'm going to give my vote to this person, these representatives, these politicians. Now, not saying that those have to be the same, Senate, Congress, mayors, and we don't, let's say it could be the same system, but it could be a totally new system. And either way, you could have this thing where the votes can be, delegated essentially. So you have your one vote, everybody has one vote, and that one vote, you can say, well, I don't want to vote on every issue, but I do want my vote to count for every issue. And this is the person that I trust to make those votes for me. And then you delegate that vote. Now, here's the beauty of it. Right now, we have elections that happen every 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, never. It happened once and then it never gets turned over. So, like, we currently have to wait for elections to make any difference. And so that's one reason people say electoralism is too slow. Well, what if electoralism was a lot faster? Because then with direct representation and with direct, with being able to choose your delegate instantly, being able to take that vote back instantly. Or in some case, like you could still do it in a place where you could have it instant, meaning like, let's say you have more direct town council type thing, okay? And your town council or your HOA or whatever little councils you have in your neighborhood, you could say, all right, well, we want to be able to like revoke someone's membership immediately. Like if you make a really bad decision, we want to be able to get rid of you like basically immediately if so voted. Meaning like people could literally take their votes back and give it to someone else. They could literally take their votes back and keep it for themselves. You could also put basically locks on things where you could say, all right, well, we can't actually remove our votes, like, or you can remove your vote, but the vote doesn't actually get removed until set period, because these are the locks, meaning like you vote and your vote is locked until X time. And then so like you could still do interim periods where you could say like, well, we're not going to like take the president out of office just because people got upset with him. Like you need to have time for things to play out. Some things can't, so you could still have 4-year elections. Anyway, so using more immutable technologies, we can create better can't be evil systems. We know then using blockchain with a properly vetted, properly built system, or just using something like Ethereum, but with a proper, a properly aligned voting system with a way of knowing that each wallet, which counts as a vote, is actually a human person attached to an address. And these systems aren't impossible because we're already doing it. Because that is one of those things where, I don't like, even I made the comment about the voter fraud that, the president and Elon both implied happened. And I don't like the idea of talking about voter fraud, because I think in mass, like the way that it's implied that there's a bunch of fake voters is just not happening. There's no proof for that in the way that it's being presented. I think it's more likely that like on the back end, someone is able to just swap a bunch of votes in a way that's not able to be said like, oh, this person. So it's kind of like the privacy issue, I think, is what it is. I think that there's some kind of cryptography that goes between like the electronic voting and the tally. And so it protects the individual. It protects identity. And that's important. But the problem is, if you're not doing it on a blockchain and someone has the ability to change the data, then you can literally just flop a bunch of numbers over and there's no proof to say that my vote got changed. And if you can't line up person to person, then there's no proof of a voter fraud. And I think that's where it's disingenuous from the right, is they always try to say, oh, illegal aliens or whoever else, or like dead people are voting. And there's just no proof of that. And there have been edge cases maybe at best. But either way, my point being that like we already know that we have tried and true systems for most voter fraud, and this would make it even more airtight. But the problem currently is that most people think about blockchain purely as cryptocurrency, and they don't think about the functionality of it. And that's kind of why Bitcoin is leading the charge and Ethereum is taking a back seat, because Bitcoin has provenance. Bitcoin is, the way I look at it is, Bitcoin is the faith play. Bitcoin is the holy. It has, as they say, what's the word? Divine conception. Like Nobody knows where it came from. It's just magic. It came from Satoshi Nakamoto, who no one knows who he is, who they are. And it's likely multiple people, and it could be the CIA. It could be the very U.S. government making the life raft it's telling everyone to get on. Regardless, I think there is a faith play there in the sense that like Bitcoin has to succeed for other cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies to feel legitimate. It at least has to succeed long enough for people to believe in blockchain, and then something else can come along and like serve the needs in a better way. So I think Ethereum is that thing, and so the reason I say that is because Bitcoin can't do the things Ethereum can do. You can't do the same level of governance. And the other thing is like IDs. I know everyone thinks NFTs are a terrible idea, but just taking the concept of non-fungible items, meaning an NFT, a non-fungible token, basically was just saying that this is a one-of-one item, and your ID is a one-of-one item. We already have digital IDs. You have your state wallet ID or whatever that's now on your phone, and you have the real ID. And so putting that attached to a blockchain wallet, an Ethereum wallet, Solana wallet, or a wallet that can cross many different types of things, but having a blockchain wallet attached to your ID and your passport would mean that we could easily create voting systems around that ID and know that you've only voted once, and know, this is the other thing though with the privacy. I've thought a lot about this. Like, so as far as like privately, your vote should be private, but in a block, so like, meaning if you delegate your vote to a representative, we need to know how the representative votes. We need to know that our representatives are fulfilling things the way we want to be voted, but individuals should be a mass. So if an individual votes, it will be like, well, these are the amount of independent voters. These are the amounts for candidate A. These are your amount for candidate B. Because what I'm saying is we would have the direct democracy option, meaning like, when Congress or whatever governmental bodies go up for, voting for things, you as an individual would be able to have your individual vote if you are tapped in, and if you want to have your individual vote, you can do that. And if you don't, then you delegate it to a representative to make a vote for you. Point being that like, blockchain is currently not at that point. They're working on zero knowledge, where it essentially we would be able to have proof, irrefutable proof that like your ID, your wallet cast a vote, but we don't know what that vote is, but we know you voted and that vote is legitimate on the other end. And this is all made possible through blockchain technology. I think that Vitalik Buterin is somebody you should be keeping up with if you're interested in this type of stuff, because he is the creator of Ethereum. He was a Bitcoiner. He has a book of his collected writings, essays, called Proof of Stake. And I would recommend reading it if you're interested in this kind of thing, because even though he is the creator of Ethereum, he's not like directly hands-on anymore, but he is a thought leader in the space of blockchain and cryptocurrency. And to me, he's one of the only people that doesn't come purely from a business perspective. He talks a lot about governance, voting. He talked about prediction markets way back in the day before they were popular. I'm not a huge fan of prediction markets. He does talk about it, but prediction markets could be interesting in a society that's not capitalistic, because what we're seeing right now, the problem with prediction markets is it's just gambling. It's just people trying to bet big on being right. And that doesn't, like, maybe it presents a clearer, like, I look at prediction markets because you seeing the way people like are thinking about things can give you a clearer view of the future, that like the media, the news, the source material is still waiting on. And, data is information. Data is translatable into decision making. But currently, I think markets are the wrong way to think about every decision. Um, because under competition, the only thing you can do with alpha is like take a move against other people. I think that like people are always thinking about using information that they have as like an advantage to increase their life and their quality of life over another person's, rather than thinking like all information can bring us all to a better quality of life for all people. And competition is what does that, because why should I think of good ideas that make everyone's life better? Like, capitalism is what leads to that type of thing. And in the last episode I talked about how like largely like laws against murder have like stamped out murder in us, but not completely. It's still there. But a lot of it is still there because there's still enough loopholes and enough like hatred and prejudice against, women and people of color, just other people you're jealous of in general, that like people will go over past the law and past the social mores to like commit murder still. So we're still close enough to that animal self to like enjoy killing. And but like largely laws and regulations have stamped it out in us to a large degree. That same thing, what I was getting at is that same thing can be done with greed and hatred and racism. Like, people don't have to like it. People don't have to, but if we want as a society to get rid of these things, we can get rid of them in systems first, and then they grind out slowly in people. We slowly get more civilized. We get over the fact that like we can't just kill people when we're angry. We'll get over the fact that you can't just use information to get over on other people. And I think that's really what a lot of anger comes down to. It's even what a lot of arguments about sexual consent come down to, because a lot of what women are calling predatory behavior in men is what men are like, well, that's what I use to get laid. And it's like, yeah, there's a problem there, bro. Like, that's what we're trying to say. And so it's a rough path. Like, that's what's going on, is we are animals that are slowly, we might, like, this is actually kind of even how I think about democracy and like where we are as a country. Like, we're animals that have learned the difference between right and wrong a long time ago. But we've used religion and racism and prejudice and personal bias and our insecurity in the world to be a reason why we do things that are wrong anyway. We don't come from a place of morality because we have so many logical reasons, quote unquote, logical reasons why protectionism and competition and isolationism and nationalism and every other ism that you can think of is what I need to be doing to my other people in the world. Because if I don't do it, somebody else will. It's all an arms race. It's all a race to the bottom. The only way we're going to overcome those things is systems. The only way we got here is through systems. So arguing from a structural functionalist perspective and saying that like, well, religion got us so far, and religion became empire, and empire became feudalism, and feudalism became the Renaissance, and double entry bookkeeping and even what I'll get into when I get in the Crusades episodes is how the Crusades actually opened up the entire banking system in a sense, because people needed to be able to travel and they needed money when they traveled to do these wars. So therefore the Medici was able to like kind of grow out of this like, not during the Crusades, but like through the creation of there needing to be more and more banks, more access to gold throughout on the road, and more people getting involved in the legitimacy of these banks. And then with the invention of the printing press and double entry bookkeeping and, the ability to create credit. All of these technologies are what created then the ability to think about democracy. And getting into what I was going to say about that, like going into it. So like democracy, you can say like, well, the people who founded democracy did it on colonialism, and they did it on the backs of patriarchy, and they did it on the backs of slaves and the genocide of Native Americans. And yet the ideals that are there are noble. And so like we are a species of animal that is hopefully getting better and better, and systems and laws and punishment and like that is what it's going to take to get there. Is like, as long as we've been around, our written history is very short, and we are unfortunately very stupid and very fragile creatures, and we hurt each other out of stupidity, and we ignore what we know is right because we're weak. And so it takes laws to get us there. We drag ourselves into the future based on systems. And so one thing that's always bothered me, like, is our aversion, we turn what would be beneficial to us into dystopian nightmares. And I really think that's a form of propaganda. So A Clockwork Orange is a perfect example, where A Clockwork Orange, especially if you've seen the movie, the message of A Clockwork Orange is like, oh, you can be a terrible person who attacks women, kills old men, you rob cars, you rob people, you do every terrible crime that there can be, and then the state takes you into prison and says voluntarily, do you want to join a program that will get you out of prison earlier, but you'll never be able to commit a crime again? And the way that you don't commit those crimes is because they pump you full of some drug that makes you sick. And they show this person a lot of violence, and then like the point being that your body gets a natural sickness when you then do wrong. So then this person, by the end of the thing, can't even have sex anymore because sex has now been equated to violence. So every time they go to even be intimate with someone, they get sick. And so their entire humanity has been stolen from them in exchange for their freedom. And the question is like, well, obviously, like this is bad. You've stolen a person's free will. But that person's free will, then they go through a lawsuit, there's a whole thing, and that person gets like taken off the drug. They somehow cure them. And then in the movie ends there with them getting their free will back, and they go right back to wanting to hurt and kill and rape. And that's where the movie ends. And that's kind of where and that's where the book ended in the US at that time, which is what Stanley Kubrick based the film off of, was the American version of the book that only had 20 chapters. In the 21st chapter, the way Anthony Burgess written it, it was Alex then runs into someone else from his past, the one guy you never saw again through the book. There's 4 of them at the beginning. 2 of them later become police. So these criminals become police and then do wrong to Alex as a criminal getting out of jail. But the one guy you never heard about again, he's there at this coffee shop. Like Alex is like 40 years old. He just gets off of a night of like robbing people with his new gang of young men. But now he's a 40-year-old. They're a bunch of kids and he's robbing still. And he runs into one of his guys that used to roll with him when he was a kid. And this guy's married and he's an adult and he looks, and they have a conversation and he's like, oh man, I should have grown up. I should have had a wife. I should have been normal. And I think he decides to be normal at that point. He quits the gang and goes to have a normal life. And it's like this, happily ever after idea. This idea that like, oh, well, free will should exist because, if you take away a person, like, what's the point of being a good person if you don't have the choice to do evil? And this is one of those Jordan Peterson and other, hyper masculine people, like, really focus on this, like, being able to kill and not killing actually makes you a greater man than just not killing. And, whatever. I guess there's some, like, philosophical, like, over the top chivalrous argument for this stupid, this way of thinking. It's very barbaric, it's very, Conan would agree with you, but it doesn't suit our future. And so the point I was getting to with all this is, like, I'm sure there's another bunch of sci-fi we can talk about, but in general, like, when we think about, Minority Report is one of those things, or, even though in Minority Report you find out a human tampered with the shit. Same thing with, like, iRobot, AI, like anything where you find out, like, Judge Dredd or Demolition Man, or Demolition, maybe not Demolition Man. What was there? There's another one. Whatever. Most of the time, you find out that these systems that prevent crime, prevent evil, didn't actually malfunction. And they're not actually as dystopian. It's that a person took advantage of that system and used that system to their own, ends. And essentially that's the same problem with, like, you can say with capitalism. It's like, oh, capitalism should be a democratizing thing, except corporations turn evil and buy politicians and then turn on the people. And so one way that China deals with these types of things, even though they're a capitalist nation now, is like, if you become too powerful as a CEO and you start to do crime and you commit financial crimes or crimes against the country, they kill you, And so I think that, like, we can't make people love each other. We can't make people care for each other, but we can create systems in which it's harder and harder and harder to do evil. And by not being able to do evil, we create better and better and better systems. And as long as we don't want to get ourselves so mired down in systems that we can't ever get out of it, but we do want to have good systems that slowly turn us into better people. So you can take off the training wheels if we ever get to be better and better species. But at the current rate, like, people still want to kill. People still, what I was saying with the prediction markets, like, people still want to gamble. And, like, game theory, we should be using game theory to think about how can we create better systems for the world, but also how can we, like, use these urges that people have to help society and the individuals get to a better place. Like, the same way that social media has been designed to steal all your attention for ads and others, and to buy your political ideals. Like, we could create systems better aligned for other things. We have the technology, and I think that there is this concept of, like, you don't want to take away people's agency, but we're already doing that. Markets already take away your agency. Your boss already takes away your agency. The apps that you are addicted to take away your agency. And so, yeah. The other thing to briefly get into, I won't dive deep into this, but another thing about the future that, like, I talked mostly about crypto and how blockchain and better money, crypto, blockchain, all that can be used to create better systems that kind of lock in people's ability to tap directly into governance and lock out people's ability to commit mass fraud. And not just in voter scale, but also, like, we will be able to see openly, like, how our representatives are representing us and things like that. And then better financial systems, same thing. We could get to a point where we can really see, rather than just we could have some transparency about how people enrich themselves while in office, and then that can lead to prosecution, and it'll lead to people not wanting to do it. It will lead to people not wanting to get in office and do bad things, and it will lead to people that do bad things in office serving punishments for it, instead of everybody just being like, oh, well, everybody does it. But to briefly touch on AI, when we think about AI and its damage on the environment, we think about AI and its impact on our future and jobs. For one, I've said, like, there needs to be UBI. There needs to be, if AI is going to make the future better, it needs to be for people, not for profit. I think that AI can help us to solve the issues of AI. AI can help us figure out how we can build safer, cleaner data centers, how we can have a smaller impact and bigger imprint on the ability of artificial intelligence to help people. AI is going to help us expand. As I've talked about before, AI is not the creative part. It is offloading the cognitive part in a big way. And so AI is going to be able to do things humans can't do. The same way that a human can't build a computer chip by hand, an AI is going to be able to build DNA and new computer chips and new computer programs and things people would never be able to do, but it's going to do it under the guidance of human creativity. And if we get that creativity aligned toward increasing the quality of life of everybody in the world and making it work for everyone, that's the only way we get to this better future. It's the only way we get there without war. It's the only way we get there without, just furthering the hatred between religions and races and every form of nationalism. And we need to create better systems for humans. And I think that that involves neutralizing technologies, decentralizing technologies. And that is one of the problems currently with AI is incredibly centralized, and crypto is more decentralized, and we need to be thinking about this. And I think I encourage everyone on the left and everyone who's progressive to be thinking about technology as a tool that when you talk about seizing the means of production, technology is that. It's not just about, yes, it's about food, it's about farms, it's about all of that, but we need to create systems that work for everyone and create systems that reduce people's ability to hurt each other. Financial crimes, financial hatred, racism, sexism, polluting the world. Corporations need to pay for everything. And yeah, so there you go. This is an entire episode of nothing but solutions, my friend. Solutions. So, see you next time.